Okay, well, thank you guys so much for being with us today. This is our monthly TA webinar. We are going to be going over how to answer those awkward questions. I feel like this is probably one of those tried and true methods of like, hey, if you can handle yourself under pressure, answering these awkward questions, you're going to impress some recruiters. So we really wanted to dive into some strategies and get some insights as well on how to answer these questions. But just to kind of start us off, hi, my name is Katie Rains. I am a recruiter and career coach here at ACDS. Hosting with me is the lovely Miss Nicole Parsons. And so we just want to kind of introduce ourselves and tell you a little bit about ACDS if you don't already know about it. We are a nonprofit here in Central Arkansas, really with the goal to help folks grow in the IT field. And so we partner with companies large and small throughout the state to offer internship and apprenticeship opportunities. So if you guys are interested in, either training or, any of those opportunities, please check out our website. If you go to job openings, you can see our current openings. We've got some in the Jonesboro area, the Northwest Arkansas area, and then a couple of apprenticeships in the Central Arkansas area. So please feel free to check us out up there. And we're going to just jump into it. Let me see here. Computer is running a little slow today, y'all. It's feeling this heat. There we go. Okay. So, the very purpose of conducting interviews is for recruiters to gauge the suitability of candidates based on their answers. And really our responses to, these questions, they play a huge role in shaping the direction of the interview. I know for me, I have been in interviews, especially when I was younger, where I was asked questions that I didn't know how to answer tactfully, and I ended up putting my foot in my mouth. I don't know if you guys have ever been there, but I certainly have been. Or maybe you answered the question just fine, but you didn't know when to stop talking. I've done this before, ended up disclosing way more information than I meant to. I like to call this diarrhea of the mouth. It happens way more often than people think. And so, whenever this happens, we, can kind of feel like, oh, it's game over, done, I messed everything up. So we kind of want to get back on track at that point. So, sometimes we can really feel like we're at the mercy of the interviewer, especially if like they ask us those follow-up questions, such as like, hey, tell me about, why you left this position. Can you go into a little bit more detail? I noticed that you've got a gap on your resume. Can you tell me a little bit about that? I promise you that the interviewer is not out to get you. They do not have a vendetta against you. Recruiters, we use past behavior to predict future actions. So for example, how do you respond when you're under pressure and you're being asked these awkward questions? I think the really great thing is to know that you have the control to shape the course of the interview. So, by gaining insight to, how recruiters think, how they want you to answer questions, this can really help steer the direction of the conversation. We can actually steer the direction of the conversation and ensure that, it leads to more favorable outcomes. So it's important whenever we think about these questions and, we kind of start formulating a response, you guys really need to understand it's important to handle this with a level head. Remember, once again, recruiters, they use past behaviors to predict future actions. So if you're venting frustrations about a previous employer, this might, make a big old red flag come up for recruiters on how you handle, adversity constructively. So, save any of kind of like the nitty gritty details, like, oh, well, didn't like my past boss, or, was a toxic work environment, save all of that for, your friends, your family, your therapist. That's not the right time to talk about in an interview. Really during interviews, you want to be positive. You want to be having a growth mindset, and you want to be poised. So we are going to take some time in preparation for an interview, and you're going to plan out your answers. They're going to ask you these questions, so let's not be unprepared. Let's learn how to answer these awkward questions right the first time around, so that way you don't miss out on some really great opportunities. And we don't want recruiters overlooking those amazing skills that you have just because you don't know how to answer some more awkward questions. So I'm going to pass it off to Miss Nicole Parsons, and she's going to go through some of these questions with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie. So sorry, everyone. I'm going to stay off camera. I actually just got done at the dentist today because I didn't plan my day very well. But so I'm going to stay off camera just so we don't focus on half my face being nuts. But yeah, so like Katie said, we are just going to make peace. We are going to not focus as much on, all of that negativity. Obviously, whenever we leave a company, we had some poor feelings, right? We got laid off, or, we didn't have a great relationship at work, and everything was just kind of not very like warm and fuzzy. Sometimes we get a little bit frustrated. And when we're talking about that in a recruiter, in those interview settings, sometimes that feeling can kind of come out, and it's not really the best place for it. So like Katie said, we're just going to dive into, some of those pitfalls, where we can avoid some of that, and where we can kind of change the language a little bit so that we are not setting ourselves up in a negative situation with a new recruiter. So a common pitfall is going to be blaming others, such as your managers, your coworkers, all for the decision to leave, whatever that decision was, whether it's yours or theirs. This usually comes out in the way of, so-and-so did this and I just couldn't deal with them, so I left. And like, you're starting to get more animated and more frustrated. And it can just come across as very unprofessional. It may raise concerns about how you handle interpersonal conflicts. Are we going to start seeing this in the new work setting if we made the offer to you, and starts to, paint that narrative of like, oh, know if this is the best situation or if this is really what we want to bring in. And so we start to bring in some of that doubt, which we want to avoid, obviously. Whenever you utilize negative language, using overly negative language, like describing a previous job as, oh my gosh, this place was such a nightmare, right? I could not stand that place. That can paint you in a very pessimistic light. So it's just important to maintain that constructive tone, focus on the positive aspects of your experience. I always like to tell candidates that less is more sometimes, right? So not going into excessive details. Keeping those answers about the reason for leaving just short and sweet. I always like to go, it's none of your business. Let's focus on what was important. Most cases, you only have 30 minutes in an interview. And so do we really want to spend, 15 of the 30 minutes running through reason for leaving? Because all of a sudden we painted it in this very negative light. Okay, tell me more about that. How do you handle situations with your manager? How do you handle these situations? Because now as a recruiter, I have to figure that out to see if it was a one-off situation. Maybe it was just this, what was the circumstance? How did this all come about? I need to understand the full story so that I can make better predictions going forward. It's like, okay, this is not truly who they are. This is just a bad situation, or whatever the case, right? And so we just want to spend the 30 minutes going over all the positive stuff, all of your great skill sets, all the things that you bring to the table. Not in the past. I don't want to talk about why I had to leave other jobs. I want to talk about why I'm a great fit for this role, right? So just keeping that in mind, sometimes less is more. Sometimes you show a lot of resentment. We start to see that come out, and it can signal to the recruiter that you may struggle to adapt with challenges or collaborating effectively in that team environment. Again, utilizing that past behavior to predict future behavior. So just being mindful of that when we're going forward. So while it's crucial to avoid some of these negative approaches, let's also just explore how to answer these questions in a more positive manner, right? In a happier tone. So we're, like Katie said, we're going to focus on growth opportunities, going into it with that growth mindset. We're going to highlight opportunities for growth and development from that your previous job may not have provided, right? I'm looking for a new opportunity because I'm really interested in growing in this area. Unfortunately, my last organization didn't really have that opportunity for me. So I'm looking to kind of move forward on that side. So we just want to, again, painting it in a very growth mindset. We're moving forward. Company was fine, but I'm looking for this. This is something they didn't offer, and this is what I want to learn going forward. So just being able to mention, your desire to take on new challenges, to expand your skill set, all of that is very positive and it's very exciting because now I'm getting the picture of if the offer was made, you're excited, you're, driven, you're going to do all these great things because you're amped up, you're ready to go. We're going to emphasize your professional values. So discussing how your decision to leave aligns with your professional values and your career aspirations. Framing it as a proactive step towards finding a better fit for your skills and ambitions. You're not going to fit everywhere, that's fine. But how can we frame it in a way that more aligns with, I'm just looking for somewhere that fits my skills, where I see myself heading, again, that growth mindset, still trying to move myself forward, looking for an organization that can help me do that. We're going to highlight all of your previous achievements. So again, instead of dwelling on that negative experience in the past, and we're going to let all of it go, we're going to showcase our achievements and contributions in the previous roles. This is going to demonstrate your ability to overcome those challenges and to make that meaningful contribution to the organization. And then by reframing your answers in that positive light, again, we're presenting ourselves as proactive, we're forward thinking, we're focused on new opportunities rather than dwelling on the past grievances. Again, past behavior predicting future behavior. Sometimes recruiters will utilize that like, oh, they talk really negatively about that last company. Are they going to do that for me in the future? I don't know if that's the best decision for us. And so just keeping in mind, right? We can have those negative feelings. We can be upset about those previous experiences, but knowing a time and a place, like Katie said, talking to your friends, talking to your family, letting that come out in those situations. And in the interview, we are positive, forward thinking, we're excited, ready to go. There's time and a place. So moving right along. I noticed a gap on your resume. So navigating questions about resume gaps can be very nuanced. They're contingent on various factors such as, the duration and the recency of that gap. So there's a couple things that kind of go into it, but we'll try to give some examples on how to kind of navigate that question the best we can. I think with this one, honesty is the best policy in most cases within reason. We want to make sure, again, that none of your business, if it is personal life, if it's too personal, it doesn't need to come out. We'll talk about that a little bit more. The honesty is best policy. Being transparent about the gap is crucial. Recruiters appreciate authenticity in candidates. At the end of the day, people hire people, and we are looking for someone that is, whoever they are in that interview is the same person I'm going to get whenever I hire them. So that's why we drill in and we ask all the questions and we, ask the same question 10 times. It's because we're trying to, see how authentic a candidate is, see how genuine they are, and see, what answers were Googled or, a friend told them to answer them that way, or what was the truth, right? We want the honest candidate. So anyway, for example, if you took off time off of work to care for a family member, you might say, I took a break from my career to take care of my aging parent. During that time, I honed my organizational skills and problem-solving abilities while managing their medical appointments and their daily needs. So kind of reframing it in a very positive light, because, sometimes you can't help it. Sometimes you have to take off work to take care of a parent or take care of children or whatever it is. The thing we need to focus on is, what did we do in the meantime? How are we keeping our skills sharp? Did we learn anything? Are we growing in that time frame? I think the thing that scares recruiters the most with that time gap is, that the immediate thought in my head goes to someone sitting on the couch for 4 years and we just haven't done anything. We're watching TV, we're playing video games, we're doing this, and we're not really learning or growing. And so when you come back into the workforce, are those skills still sharp? Are we still on the same wave path? And so that's kind of the assumption that we need to overcome. Is it right? No. Should they make that assumption? Probably not, but I'm just being honest and telling you what typically does go through a recruiter's head on that side. And so whenever we're reframing it and we're talking about all the great things, right? Because when you're taking care of an aging parent, there are things that you need to take care of, like managing their appointments, making sure they're getting from point A to point B, right? Maybe it's fighting with the medical insurance or whatever it is. There's things that you're doing, and those are all transferable skills. That's something that we can talk about. And so in that example, honing in your organizational skills and your problem solving abilities, reframing that great skills in a better way. Let's see. So focusing on the relevant, I think I just touched on that one. If applicable, just highlighting any relevant experiences or activities that you engaged in during that gap period. So for instance, if, while you were out of work, you did pursue further education, you can say, after being laid off, I took the opportunity to enroll in some online courses, maybe even the ones through ACDS, because we offer online courses as well, to enhance my skill set in, digital marketing or data analytics, whatever it is, right? I completed certifications in SEO and social media management, preparing myself for a successful transition back into the workforce. So highlighting all of the essential details, highlighting all the great skills that you just learned, making it, again, very, very positive. The most common gap scenarios that we see mostly include periods of like stay-at-home parenting, or, candidates that were dealing with medical issues, or they were facing challenges in finding employment after being laid off. That one's probably the most common right now, just how the industry has been. But we just want to provide a brief, honest explanation without dwelling too much in the details. So for instance, after my son was born, I decided to take a few years off to be a stay-at-home parent. During that time, you'll see this is kind of the pattern. While I was off, here's what I did. I volunteered at a local charity organization and kept my skills sharp by freelancing on small projects. Anything like that, right? We just want to highlight what were we doing in the meantime. Now, on the other side, here are some things we might want to avoid when we're answering that kind of question. We want to avoid oversharing. We want short and sweet. Sometimes less is more. There's a couple different themes, and that's probably one of the ones you'll notice as we go through here. So while honesty is very important, there is no need to divulge all the excessive personal details, right? We need to maintain those boundaries and refrain from sharing details that aren't relevant to the job. So for example, if you did face health challenges, you can just say, I had to take a break from my career to focus on my health. Now that I'm fully recovered, I'm excited to return to work and contribute my skills to a new team. We don't want to dive in and say, here's exactly what my health issues were. Here's how long I was out. I had to have this surgery, and then I recovered for this long, and then I went and had this surgery. Again, it's none of their business. That doesn't pertain to a work setting. It was just health concerns, right? We took care of them. They're done. We're good. We're moving on. They don't need to know. They're not your doctor. So please do not disclose all of your medical history to them. We also want to avoid the blame game, right? Resisting the temptation to blame others or dwell on that negative experience, keeping the tone positive, forward thinking, focusing on your readiness to re-enter the workforce. So for example, if you're laid off, you might just say, unfortunately, my previous company underwent reconstruction. My position was eliminated. However, I did use that time to network. I attended industry events, and I prepared myself for some new opportunities. So balancing that honesty with discretion. So again, while it's important to be honest, we do want you to be authentic. We also want you to exercise discretion when discussing sensitive topics. So instead of saying, I just didn't want to work, I wanted to take a break, I wanted to take this mental health time frame for myself, we want to kind of reframe it in terms of self-discovery and self-development, right? We took this time and we made it very positive. It was because of these reasons. So for example, on that one, if we did just want to take a break after leaving my last job, I took some time to reflect on my career goals, explore different industries, realized my passion for project management, and dedicated myself to gaining relevant certifications and experience. So again, It's okay to want to take that break, but what did you do in that meantime? Usually you took the break because we weren't satisfied in our last position. Something wasn't working, it wasn't, making us, happy. So we decided to figure out something new. We wanted to take that time to do that self-discovery, to move forward. And so just being able to explain that in a short, condensed way will help us quite a bit. I think at the end of the day, it's important to remember recruiters are people too. We have lived life. We are going through the struggles. We're doing all the same things that everyone else is. And so we can completely sympathize and understand when, sometimes you just need to take a step back and reevaluate. But it's all about how you share the information or how you have that conversation, which is why we're here today, to figure out how to navigate some of these questions, because it can be difficult. But just like Katie said, spend some time, reframe your answers, because they're going to get asked. These questions are going to come up. So just spending some time on like, okay, here, if asked this question, here's how I'm going to navigate it. Here is my answer. Here's how I'm going to do it, and rehearse that answer. That way it's not so foreign whenever they ask you. That way, sometimes we're nervous and our words don't come to us like we want them to. You have a semblance of muscle memory and it'll kind of work itself out. That way you don't get the diarrhea of the mouth, as Katie so lovingly said. But it'll help you kind of feel a little bit more confident when you're talking to that recruiter next time. So now we're getting ready to dive into probably the most requested, the most, confusing question that's out there for a lot of people: salary expectations. Now, it really doesn't have to be so overwhelming as it feels. It's not this huge unspoken landmine. It's really just how you approach the question and how you answer it. So sometimes, again, it just helps as we understand the recruiter, how their mind's working whenever we're going through these questions. So the salary question for a recruiter is very mundane. We ask it every single day, probably 4+ times a day on average. And so it's very routine for us. We ask it all the time. We just need the number. We're just part of the process. We just move right along. It's not like Katie said, we don't have a vendetta at you, and we're not sitting here like, oh, this one's going to trip him up. This one's going to give him some trouble. It's just another question for us. So we just need an answer. So we'll talk about, do's and don'ts for that one as well. So you get the question, what are your salary expectations? It's coming. They're going to ask you, right? To be able to create an offer letter, well, we need to know a dollar amount to be able to put on said offer letter. So we have to have this conversation. So anyway, the question's going to be asked. So make sure that we're prepared to answer it. So like I said, it's a very routine question. We answer it or ask it 4+ times a day on average. One of my personal pet peeves, and I won't speak for all recruiters, but it is one of my pet peeves, is that long explanation, right? Well, I did my research for this position, the market research, I asked people, I did this, and then finally, after maybe 20 minutes, I finally get the number. I love when candidates just say a number, right? I need to be within this range. Because, most of the time, recruiters have also done the market research, or their organization has done it. Usually they have a compensation person that will sit out there and do it. And so they've done the research, and, I don't have much ability to change the range. It's what's set forth by the company. And so anyway, now I'm getting a long story. Long story short, number is great. I need to be within this range. Some also things to kind of avoid is don't be overly aggressive with your answer, right? It's not a landmine, but whenever a candidate is coming at you very heated and like getting very defensive on this answer, can get a little awkward. And so I see a lot of, TikToks and YouTube and like all these other things where advice is, you don't give a number first until they give you a number. And so while in theory, this is a really great piece of advice, it usually just ends up being frustrating for a recruiter and leaves a bad taste in their mouth. And it just gets a little awkward. We're just in this weird situation, to be honest with you. Now, if executed properly, I think that it absolutely could be an effective tactic. But in reality, how this usually plays out, just to give you an example. So the recruiter asks, what's your salary expectations? Then the candidate's going to come back with, well, what's your budget for this role? And depending on the recruiter or the company, they may not disclose it to you. And it's just going to become increasingly more awkward and weird going back and forth. Like, I just need the number. Well, why don't you just give me the budget? Just give me the number. And then at that point, the recruiter is so frustrated. They're like, you know what? I don't care anymore. And so it's going to leave that bad taste in their mouth. And we want to avoid that, right? We want to be confident. We want to give that number. We want to have that conversation in a very positive way. But sometimes when we get a little overly aggressive on all these tactics that we hear and all these pieces of advice, and we try to implement them and they're not working, and we're getting awkward and we're getting frustrated, it can just really make the whole situation very uncomfortable for everyone involved. And it's probably not going to lead to an offer. So just being cautious. Again, it's all how you ask and how you have that conversation. We'll talk about that here in just a second. But also just please avoid discussing personal finances. You will, like I said, that's probably one of the most common themes. We want to keep things short and sweet. We want to not overshare any of our personal information. It's none their business. It's my favorite saying, it's none the business. We don't need to hear that you have shared custody of your children. We don't need to hear that your partner's employment just got laid off and this, and this, and I need to be at this range to be able to pay all my bills. And I've got a farm and I got this and that. Like, it's not my business. I don't need to hear about all of that. You know the range that you need to be able to afford your situation. You obviously have done enough research or enough thinking about it that you have put together a number in your head that I need this number to make sure my lights stay on, to make sure my family is fed, to make sure my farm is taken care of, whatever it is, right? Whatever your situation is, you know the number that has to be met to be able to keep everything afloat. And so just give them the range. Just give them the range. Be able to cut all the information about your personal life out and just have that conversation, right? If the position doesn't align with your range, but you need that range to, make life happen, it's probably not going to be the right role, right? Unfortunately, it's just not going to work out. And that's okay. We'll move on to the next one, because at the end of the day, you're selling your time too. So we want to make sure that whoever is buying your time, values it the way that you do. And so we just need to be careful about that. So now that we've talked about what not to do, let's end on a positive note and talk about how to navigate that question more effectively. So we're going to do our research, obviously, right? We're just not going to lead into that long explanation about how you've done all your research. We're just going to do it on the back end. Make sure that when you're looking at the ranges and salaries online, because there is a lot of resources out there to be able to find that information, just make sure that it matches again with your skill level, where you're at, your education level, whatever it is, right? All the things line up. And then that we're also looking at the appropriate state. And even if it has like the county, sometimes that'll help as well. Because obviously the, salary range for Northwest Arkansas is going to be a lot different than like Jonesboro or like a smaller rural area. It's just going to be different. The companies, bands and all that thing. So just being mindful of all of that will play a piece into it as well. So just understand that sometimes the ranges can be a little skewed depending on the nature of the data. So just making sure you know exactly where the data came from to make sure it's valid on that part. And now you can always ask the recruiter for some clarification on the role and responsibilities. That way you can kind of gauge what you'll be doing, what the compensation you'll need to be able to complete those duties, and see if it kind of lines up, right? And so that's whenever they ask, what's your budget for that position, and the candidate's really trying to not say the number first. Sometimes you can ask it that way, right? But well, I would love to give a number, but I'd love to understand the, the overall job duties and what I would be doing just to better understand the scope of my role, the impact of my role, and that way I can better give you a number that'll match that range. That's perfectly fine. You can ask for more clarification on the job. I'm happy to give you that information. That's very easy for me to do. And so sometimes that'll give you a little bit better idea, because maybe it wasn't as technical as we thought it was, and this isn't even the right job that we really see ourselves in anyway. So maybe you'll uncover some of that information there as well. But like I said, that's perfectly fine. If you want more clarification on the role, the job duties, the expectations, the scope, any of that, perfectly okay. You can consider the total compensation, and this is a newer idea or term I've heard recently. But I think it gets forgotten a lot. So keep in mind, career growth opportunities within a company, any benefits that are going to be offered, any like, is there tuition reimbursement? Are there different kind of, cool perks or benefits that come along with working for said organization? Um, is this position in person or is it remote? Because that's going to kind of affect into your total compensation, thinking like gas mileage, thinking all the things to get in your time to get to and from work, all of that. If you're traveling, any kind of, compensation or perks that go along with that. Thinking your PTO time, what does that look like? Is it PTO and sick time? Is it just one set number? How does that work? All of that's going to kind of come together for your total compensation. And so keeping that in mind, some organizations pay for employees' benefits. That's a huge cost. And so being able to factor that into your number that, okay, maybe it doesn't need to be as high as I thought because they are taking that off and they are taking care of that benefit for me. And so I can afford, to take that out, whatever it is, right? So just kind of keeping in mind the full picture. Sometimes that'll help you figure out what that total compensation will be. And lastly, if I haven't said enough, just give them that range. I'd like to be between X and Y. This is my range I need to be in. And then just let it be awkward. There is going to be this weird silence that happens after you give them that range. And it's going to be awkward. I don't have any good advice or ways to get around that. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be weird. It's going to be quiet. But to give you the insider scoop, here's what's going on the background. It's not the recruiter intentionally sitting here making things awkward and like hoping you'll word vomit and do all the things. I mean, maybe like one recruiter does that, but most circumstances, the recruiter is looking in their database, looking back at their position, the notes from the kickoff with a hiring manager. I'm just trying to remember what the range was, right? This is my 4th interview of the day, and most recruiters are handling multiple positions across multiple industries, states, positions, all the different things. And so the ranges are very, very different. And the last thing that I want to do is be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. And then it's like way outside of the range and I just lied to you. So before I open my mouth, I want to make sure that I had the right range. I double and triple checked it. We're on the same page before I move forward, right? And so that's what that silence is. They're just trying to make sure it's the right number before they open their mouth. So just let it be awkward. Don't let the word vomit get the best of you. They will tell you if it's within range. Usually we'll just say like, okay, and they'll kind of move on, or I'm so sorry, that is outside of our allotted budget for this position. The range usually tops out at this number, and then they'll let it be awkward. And that's when you can kind of go, oh yeah, I'm open to negotiation on that. Maybe we can explore a little bit more on the benefits or explore more on X, Y, and Z side. Whatever's the most important to you. Is there flexibility on, can I negotiate for more PTO time? Can I negotiate for, you can kind of navigate that conversation with the recruiter at that point. Or if it's just not for you, right? After hearing the range and after hearing everything, you're like, okay, well, I appreciate your time. Unfortunately, this is not going to work for me. And then you just kind of move on and go about your different ways. There's a couple different ways to handle it, but usually they will kind of let you know one way or the other. All right. So we have actually made it to the end of the presentation. Hopefully we answered some of the awkward questions for you. It kind of gave you some advice on how to navigate them. But in the meantime, if we didn't hit a question that you would like to be answered, maybe you can drop it in the chat. We'll try to address it in a future webinar. We'd love to figure out what you guys want to hear about going forward and what we can do for future webinars as well. If you have any questions, now is a great time. You can drop them in the chat. We'll stay online for a few more minutes to get those answered. But if you have to drop, we appreciate you so much for joining us this afternoon. We hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one. Ooh, Crystal, have you ever interviewed an autistic person before? No one has ever disclosed it to me, and so that's not. Here at ACS, we've been doing a lot more research, and we've been partnering with a lot of organizations to help us better understand how to navigate these. But I don't think I've had too much personal experience where anyone's at least disclosed it. Katie, what about you?
I have worked with candidates who have disclosed this diagnosis before. Um, I always give people the advice to not disclose that in an interview, just because you don't want to worry about there possibly, being any negative responses to that. If you're concerned about possibly different like DEIA accessibility, anything like that, then once you get that job offer, you're legally allowed to disclose any diagnoses that you have at any point. So I want you to know that. Just, I always like to tell people, make sure that you're giving yourself a leg up, that that's something they don't need to know. Like Nicole was saying, they don't need to know, certain things during that interview process, and that is one of them. Jasmine asks, does ACDS offer any job placement services for previous graduates from the apprenticeship program? Jasmine, we do. So if you, need any help, looking at your resume again, doing some networking, anything like that, please reach out to us so we can, support you in finding your next role.
Not seeing anything else roll through. Feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information is on the screen. So if anything comes up, because sometimes it hits you right after you leave, feel free to reach out to us, but we will hopefully see you all in the next one. Enjoy your day.